Mel had been running her little diner for nearly 30 years. A place with creaky wood floors and windows that caught the morning sun just right. The scent of fresh coffee drifted out onto the sidewalk before most folks were even out of bed. Her regulars were familiar faces. Retired teachers, old truck drivers, men in worn-out caps who read the paper front to back while sipping slowly on lukewarm coffee. They didn't need menus. They didn't need to be impressed. They came for routine and for Mel's quiet kindness. Around 6:45 a.m., before the sun hit the eastern windows, Mel would see the same little girl sitting on the bench out front. Frail frame, messy hair, worn-out shoes. She never came in, never asked for food. She just sat there, silent, as if she'd become part of the street itself. At first, Mel simply noticed her. But when the girl kept returning, day after day, always at the same time, always alone, Mel paid closer attention. The girl's sweater was too thin for the chilly mornings. Her hands trembled as she shoved them into her sleeves for warmth. There was a heaviness in her eyes that no child should carry. Mel didn't make a fuss. She didn't alert anyone. She just quietly packed an extra sandwich, slipped in a crisp red apple, and walked out the back door. She left the bag near the dumpster, close enough for the girl to find, but far enough not to draw attention. A few minutes later, the child would quietly appear, pick it up, and offer a small nod. That nod, simple and wordless, struck something deep inside Mel. It was then she realized the girl couldn't speak. No, thank you. No hello, just silence. But her eyes said more than words ever could. From that day forward, their quiet ritual began. Every morning, Mel prepared something extra. Sometimes it was soup in a paper cup, other times a granola bar or a warm muffin. No one at the diner knew. Not the staff, not the customers. Mel kept serving coffee, wiping counters, and smiling at old men's stories. While inside, she counted the minutes until 6:45. Once, she tried asking the girl her name. The child simply froze, lowered her head, and stepped back. Mel didn't ask again. She respected the silence. But she made sure every morning's meal had a little bit of comfort tucked in, a napkin, a note, a smiley face drawn in pen. Her way of saying, "You're not invisible. You matter." The girl never came inside, never spoke to anyone else. It seemed that Mel was the only adult she trusted, and that fragile trust was more precious than gold. The weather grew colder. Frost began to collect on the windows. Mel switched from juice to warm milk, folded the food in paper towels to keep it warm. She still didn't know where the girl slept, if she had family, or what brought her to that bench each day. But she knew this. If the girl didn't show up one morning, her heart would break with worry. Then came that Wednesday. It was colder than usual. The clouds hung low, and the wind carried a bite. Mel had just flipped the diner's lights on when she heard the sound. Engines. Not just one. 4. She turned a window and saw 4 black SUVs pull up in front of the diner. The kind you see in movies. Tinted windows. Government plates. Not something you'd ever expect in a sleepy town like hers. The doors opened in unison. Men in dark suits stepped out. A woman in uniform followed. Then, from the last SUV, an older woman emerged, gray hair, tired eyes, hands clutching a photo. They walked straight to the diner. Mel stood frozen behind the counter, her breath shallow. Something told her this wasn't just a coincidence. Her hands trembled. The woman approached the glass and gently knocked. She held up the photograph. "Ma'am, have you seen this child?" Mel stepped forward. She looked at the photo. The child was cleaner, healthier, smiling faintly. But the eyes, those eyes were unmistakable. It was her, the silent girl. And in that moment, Mel knew. The quiet story she'd been a part of was about to take a turn no one saw coming. Mel wasn't rich. She didn't have savings tucked away or vacations planned. She owned a diner, a small, no-frills place tucked into the heart of a quiet New Hampshire town. Locals knew it well. The walls smelled of bacon and black coffee. Booths were always warm, cushions patched but clean. Life at the diner moved in familiar rhythms, refilling mugs, wiping counters, hearing the same old jokes from the same old men. Mel liked it that way. Predictable, honest, Safe. Then came the girl. Mel noticed her one morning, just as September gave way to October. The air had turned sharp, and leaves danced along the sidewalks in red and gold. The girl was sitting on the bench outside the diner. Small, still, she wore a faded sweater several sizes too big and sneakers, so worn they curled at the toes. Her hands were smudged with dirt, her cheeks hollow, but her eyes, those wide, dark eyes, were alert and scared. She didn't beg. She didn't speak. She never even looked directly at the customers walking in and out. She simply sat there with her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, like she was trying to fold into herself. Mel had seen hungry before. She knew the signs. It wasn't just the way the girl sat. It was how she watched, watching the plates of food as they passed by the window, not with entitlement, but with quiet longing. There was something heartbreakingly polite in her silence. Mel didn't call attention to her. She didn't alert the police or social services. Something inside told her this child wouldn't respond well to uniforms or questions. Instead, the next morning, Mel packed an extra sandwich. Nothing fancy, just turkey and cheese wrapped in foil. She tucked an apple into the bag and added a small carton of milk. Then, before the morning rush, she slipped out the back door and placed the bag near the dumpster, just within sight of the bench. By the time she returned to the kitchen and looked out the window, the bag was gone. So was the girl. That became their quiet routine. Every morning, like clockwork, Mel prepared a meal. As the mornings grew colder, she swapped the sandwich for hot soup in a to-go cup. She began adding small things, a granola bar, a clean pair of socks, once even a soft scarf she had knit herself. The girl always returned, always at the same time. And though she never spoke, she gave Mel the smallest of smiles, just a gentle upward curve of her lips, and bowed her head. It was enough. Mel started calling her Lena in her mind. It gave the girl a presence in her thoughts, a way to pray for her at night. But Mel still knew nothing more. Not her age, not her background, not why she was alone. One morning, Mel stepped out early, hoping to catch her. She carried the food herself this time and approached the bench softly. The girl stiffened. "Sweetheart," Mel said gently, "can I ask your name?" The girl froze. Then, slowly, she tapped her chest with 2 fingers and shook her head. Her eyes welled, not with tears, but with something heavier. Shame, maybe, or fear. That's when Mel understood. She couldn't speak. The child was mute, possibly homeless, definitely alone. From then on, Mel didn't ask questions. She simply continued the ritual. Day after day, rain or frost, Lena would arrive at 6:45. She never lingered. She'd take the food with quiet hands, gnawed once, and disappear into the alley behind the diner before the first customer even walked through the front door. For 4 months, Mel came to count on that nod. It grounded her. She'd wonder where Lena went after. Did she sleep in a shelter? Under a bridge? Was someone looking for her? The silence around the girl was thick. But Mel didn't try to break it. Instead, she offered consistency, warmth, food, a thread of comfort in what had clearly been a world of chaos. Then, one frigid Wednesday morning, just as Mel turned the diner's key in the front door lock, she heard engines outside. Not 1, but 4. 4 black SUVs pulled up and lined the curb. Their windows were dark, their exteriors spotless, humming with quiet authority. They didn't belong in a sleepy town like this. Mel's stomach tightened. Something about the synchronized way the doors opened made her instinctively hold her breath. From the first SUV, a man in a black suit stepped out. Then, another from the second vehicle. The third produced a woman in full military uniform, medals gleaming, face unreadable. And finally, from the last car, came an older woman with silver hair and deep-set, tired eyes. She moved slowly but with purpose. In her gloved hands, she held a photograph. Together, they approached the diner. The older woman stepped to the glass door, looked straight at Mel, and knocked softly. Her expression was carved with worry. "Are you Mel?" she asked, voice tight with emotion. Mel nodded. "Yes." The woman held up the photograph. "Have you seen this girl?" Mel wiped her hands on her apron and stepped closer. The child in the photo was younger, cleaner, her hair brushed and parted neatly. She wore a pink dress and smiled, a small, hesitant smile. But her eyes, those eyes were unmistakable. It was Lena. Mel's breath caught in her throat. She comes here every morning. I leave her food. The woman's knees buckled slightly, and the man beside her caught her arm. She pressed a trembling hand to her lips. Her name is Alina, she whispered. She's my granddaughter. She was kidnapped nearly 2 years ago. Mel staggered back. The world tilted for a moment. Kidnapped. For 4 months. The girl had lived just outside her diner. Alone. Mute. And no one knew. Tears welled in Mel's eyes. All the small details she had noticed. The fear, the silence, the way Lena never stayed long, suddenly made heartbreaking sense. And somehow, in all that chaos, the girl had found her way to Mel and trusted her. They asked more questions, took notes, promised they'd come back. Mel stood there, still clutching her apron, as the SUVs drove off. Something inside her said this wasn't the end. Not yet. Mel's hands trembled as she stood behind the counter. Her heart was pounding so loud she could barely hear the voices around her. All she could think was, did something happen to the girl? Was she in trouble for giving her food? Had she unknowingly done something wrong? Then the older woman, the one with silver hair and a kind but exhausted face, stepped forward. Her hands shook as she reached into her coat and pulled out a photograph. She looked at Mel, her voice quivering. "Have you seen this child?" she asked, holding the photo up with trembling fingers. Mel took the picture and froze. It was her. The child in the photo looked different, cleaner, healthier, her hair brushed and her cheeks fuller. But those eyes, there was no mistaking those eyes. Wide, dark, watchful. It was Lena. Mel gasped. She felt her knees weaken. She reached for the edge of the counter to steady herself. The gray-haired woman pressed her lips together, trying to hold back emotion. "She's my granddaughter," she whispered. "Her name is Alina. She was kidnapped 2 years ago." Gasps rippled through the room. The staff stood frozen near the kitchen. The regulars, who had been sipping coffee just moments earlier, now sat in stunned silence. A spoon clinked against a saucer, and then nothing. Not a word. Not a breath. One of the agents stepped forward and showed Mel stills from surveillance footage, grainy images of a girl walking alone through alleyways, slipping into shadows, avoiding contact. They explained that Lena had escaped her captors just a few months earlier. She had vanished after that, not turning up in shelters or foster homes. She hadn't said a single word to anyone since the day she ran, not even to law enforcement, not even to her family. She was terrified of being found again, terrified of being dragged back. But somehow, in all that fear and silence, she had trusted Mel. She had chosen to come to that small diner each morning, to sit quietly, to accept the food, to give the smallest nod of thanks, and to return day after day. Out of all the people, the woman said, tears now streaming down her cheeks, you were the one she didn't run from. She stepped forward, reached for Mel's hands, and held them tightly. "You kept her alive," she said softly. "You gave her hope." Mel felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't done anything heroic. She hadn't called the police or chased down answers. She'd simply made sandwiches, poured soup, folded napkins around apples. But perhaps, in the quietest way, that had been exactly what the girl needed. The agents didn't wait long. They moved quickly. That same afternoon, they found Lena just a few blocks away from the diner, curled up in an old shed behind an abandoned building. Cold, hungry, but safe. She didn't try to run when they approached. She listened, and when they told her Mel had spoken to them, her body relaxed. She nodded. Lena was reunited with her family that same evening. There was no grand reunion, no fanfare, just a girl who had endured too much and a grandmother who hadn't given up. They held each other for a long time, the kind of embrace that says more than any words ever could. But before they left town, the grandmother came back one last time. Mel had just finished mopping the floor when she looked up and saw the SUV pull in again. This time, it was just the older woman and Lena. Mel opened the door before they even knocked. Lena stepped in quietly, holding a small stuffed bear. Her coat was new, her face brighter, her hair tucked neatly under a knitted hat. But what melted Mel's heart was the way she moved. Calmer now, less like a frightened bird. She walked straight to Mel and wrapped her arms around her waist. Tightly, like she didn't want to let go. Mel hugged her back, eyes wet with tears she didn't bother to hide. For a long moment, the diner was silent, just the sound of two hearts finally at peace. The gray-haired woman approached and placed an envelope on the counter. "It's not payment," she said softly. "It's a thank you to help you keep doing what you do for others like her." Mel didn't open the envelope. She didn't care what was inside. Before they left, Lena turned back one last time. She pressed two fingers gently to her chest, then pointed to Mel, her silent way of saying thank you. Mel nodded, smiling through tears. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness reached the deepest corners of someone's world. And sometimes a sandwich and a smile are enough to save a life. The next morning, just as sunlight crept across the windows of Mel's diner, a long black limousine quietly pulled up outside. It wasn't the usual black SUVs from before. This was different, sleek, polished, and far more formal than anything her small New Hampshire town was used to. Mel was refilling the coffee machine when she looked up and froze. The door of the limo opened slowly. Lena stepped out first. She wore a clean coat, her hair neatly tied, her shoes spotless. In her hands was a small bouquet of flowers wrapped in newspaper. No entourage, no flashing lights. Just a silent moment between a girl who had once been lost and the woman who had gently helped her find her way back. The bell above the door jingled. Lena walked in without hesitation. The diner went quiet, not in fear or surprise, but out of reverence. Everyone seemed to sense they were witnessing something sacred. She made her way to the counter and, without a word, wrapped her arms tightly around Mel. It was a hug full of weight and warmth. A hug that said more than any sentence ever could. Mel leaned down, holding the girl close. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let go. She didn't speak either. She just held on. After a long while, Lena stepped back, placed a small bouquet on the counter, and pulled a tiny thank you card from her coat. Two simple words were written inside. Thank you. Mel thought that would be the end of it. A beautiful, quiet closure to a chapter she hadn't even realized she was part of. But a few weeks later, while organizing stock in the kitchen, Mel received an envelope, thick, official-looking. The return address was in Boston. Inside was a letter from Lena's family and legal documents. They had set up a trust fund in Mel's name. It wasn't a token gesture. It was enough to keep the diner running for many years. Enough to fix what needed fixing. Enough to let Mel keep serving people without worrying about bills or broken equipment. Mel sat at the kitchen table and read the letter slowly. Her hands trembled, not from shock, but from something deeper, gratitude, disbelief, and a quiet sense of purpose. But it wasn't the money that moved her most. It was the last part of the letter, written in Lena's small, shaky handwriting. Because of you, I wasn't invisible anymore. Mel placed the letter beside the now-dried bouquet she had saved in a glass jar near the register. She didn't consider herself a hero. She hadn't rescued anyone in a dramatic way. She hadn't asked questions or chased danger. All she had done was offer a sandwich each morning, a warm cup of soup on colder days, a silent gesture of kindness to a child too scared to speak. What stayed with Mel wasn't the limousine, not the check, not even the town's praise. It was the moment a silent little girl, frightened, mute, and alone, began to trust again. And it all started in the back alley of a diner, where kindness was served without conditions. Because sometimes a simple sandwich can save a life. If this story moved your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Old Soldier Story. Sometimes it's the quiet gestures, the extra sandwich, the gentle smile, that touch a soul more deeply than words ever could. You never know. A simple act of kindness might be saving someone's life right now. We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever helped someone quietly, without expecting anything in return? Share your story in the comments below, because these moments, small, honest, and unseen, are what remind us of the goodness still left in this world.